For aspiring songwriter artists who look up to you, what advice would you give them?
Even if you feel like you're nothing special, you are made one of one. And your outlook on this world, the sound that comes out of your voice, really, really exploring that fearlessly and relentlessly is gonna pay dividends in the future.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Sonic.ly podcast where music creators educate music creators. I'm Elmo. In today's episode, we're thrilled to be joined by one of the most soulful and versatile voices in music, JP Cooper. Known for his signature blend of gospel-rooted vocals and heartfelt lyricism, JP first captured global attention with his breakout hit September Song that helped launch his debut album, Raised Under Gray Skies, to multi-platinum status. JP has returned with a new single, Summer of Love, that marks the first taste of his upcoming third studio album, Just a Few Folk. It's a record crafted across multiple continents, filled with rich instrumentation and introspective storytelling. In today's episode, we'll dive into the making of this new album, the journey behind his most iconic releases, and what he's learned from years of touring, collaborating, and growing through music. So without further ado, let's welcome the brilliant JP Cooper to the Sonic.ly podcast. What's up, man?
Hey, buddy. That was wonderful. Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you, and we've been really looking forward to this because I've just been a huge fan of what you do and the sonics and the vocals and the lyrics that come out of every layer that you create. It's really, I would like to describe it as sort of like a warm, comfy blanket, and yeah, it's something that you just love to turn on with the misses and just vibe out with. So yeah, thank you for being here once again.
Amazing. Absolute pleasure.
Mm. So if we could, would we be able to rewind the clock back a little bit to the beginning? Did you grow up with music in your life?
Not so much, there's certain people who, music was always played in the house and, their family played, or mine wasn't like that. My home growing up, there wasn't much music around. There was definitely a lot of creativity. My dad was a painter, and as a result of that, my sisters played with art supplies and things like that. But yeah, our home when I was young it was a little bit broken, I guess. My mum died when I was a baby, and my dad obviously was left behind with five of us. So my dad had to stop working, which meant that we didn't really have any income. He was looking after us, so he was kind of dealing with his grief, but he dealt with it quite a lot through his artwork and through his faith. And so I grew up kind of watching that and watching how he went through that. But to me, that was just normal. It was kind of a situation I found myself in. There wasn't really a before and after. It was like I was a baby, and I just grew up with that. So the process of creation and using it as an outlet was just something that I thought everybody did. Music, there was a few cassettes on rotation in my dad's car, but not many. I can remember one of them was the Drifters. So, all of those amazing Drifters songs kind of another one was James Taylor. There's a bit of Lionel Richie in there. So, it was song based music, but really, I think being in Manchester was the reason why I found music as something that I was interested in. It was, what was it? It was kind of late 90s. Lots of Oasis were, huge. So there were more and more young lads in Manchester buying guitars. So it became kind of normal for boys to kind of have a guitar in their house. And so it was kind of an accident that, one of my best friends bought a guitar. We go around to his house and he would have learned an Oasis song or, a Foo Fighters song or something like that. And we would, cover those songs or just play around. So it was quite an organic thing rather than coming from, a big creative family. Although that did play its role.
I feel like your sound and the melodic and chord choices that you choose have a heavy soul-based influence to it. You talk about Oasis and the band era in the UK, but then it kind of transitioned to you as a creator, creating this very rich, soulful music. How did that happen?
So I think, yeah, being in Manchester at that time, all of the, when it got to the point where it was like, well, let's make a band, everyone wanted to do the guitar thing. It was kind of typical Manchester boy guitar music. And actually, a lot of my friends started looking back into kind of grunge music, and we really got into that. But it was always the more stripped back moments of those songs that I really resonated with. And then I started to get into bands like REM, Counting Crows, I guess starting to get a little bit more rootsy, which especially with Counting Crows, it was kind of Midwestern Americana. And then I went from there to people like Ben Harper, and slowly but surely there was more black music and black influence creeping into that. That was when I sort of started to discover, I guess, Bill Withers. I started looking back, finding things like that. And I just knew that all of a sudden, I can remember, this is a bit of a jump forward. I can remember hearing "The Boy Is Mine" by Brandy and Monica on the radio and being like,
Yeah.
"What is this?" The runs and the vocals and the arrangements and the play between the two voices. And I bought that record, but I didn't tell any of my friends about it. It was like because everyone was like too cool, into like guitar music and R&B, and kind of it was just I didn't have any friends that were into that. But as I matured, I knew that there was something. I started listening to, the greats, your Arethas and your Sam Cookes and your Al Greens and all those people. But again, all of my friends are into guitar music, so I purposefully tried to find a gospel choir to join
Mm.
because I wanted to explore that. I loved the arrangements. I loved, like you say, the chord choices, the colours that are used within that. And I was lucky enough to find a choir in Manchester that was not really affiliated with anything. So there was no, I was always playing in bands at the time, so I couldn't really commit, but it was kind of just drop in as and when you can. And that became a real, I guess, a place of exploration, a very safe place of exploration, because I was singing within so many other voices that I could just explore. And I often kind of refer to myself as, just a piece of very plain, a cheap cut of meat that's been well seasoned. So I kind of marinated in that for a while, and came out the other end with this new way of expressing myself that just felt like home to me.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm really really grateful for that. It was a really rich time in my life.
Did the conductor or the director of that choir did he or she allow you to shine?
Yeah, so Wayne Ellington is an amazing man. He was the guy who started the choir and ran the choir and still runs the choir now. He's actually a very good friend of mine. He's a godfather of one of my children, and he's actually done a lot of arrangements on the music that I've created, when it comes to vocals, including on the new record, which we can get into in a little bit. But it was quite funny because I was quite shy. It's not that like I wasn't confident in terms of like my abilities, but I was never one to kind of stick my neck out and be like, oh, can I jump forward and do some ad libs? But he would say, okay, we're doing a concert. I want you to take the lead part, so I would take the lead part. But what he would do was, and a lot of the time in these gospel concerts, was the arrangements would be very fluid. So he would pull me out to the front. I would sing this song, and then he would go around a section where there's like a vamp between the choir and the main singer, and it would go on and on and on, and you'd have to keep filling the gaps. So it was a good training. I think he knew when to push me out of my comfort zone. And the other great thing was, he would often, sometimes they'd do things and he would pull out different singers at different parts of the song, and they'd do a few bars. And he would always, there was this amazing singer called Mandy and she was like, classic, amazing gospel singer. And now and again, he'd make me sing after her, and it was like, oh my gosh. So I think there's something really special about being surrounded by amazingly talented people. It makes you up your game, you learn from them, and it's a humbling experience as well. And it makes you really lean into what are the qualities that you have. It's not necessarily about who can hit the highest note or who can do the craziest riff. It's actually, well, how do I express myself and how do I connect with people through that, regardless of who the next person is singing? Like, what's my story that I get to put into that word or into that feeling? And I think that really opened my eyes to, because when I was singing in bands, it was like I wanted to, be playing in these rock clubs and things, and I wanted to be like the best singer. And then I realized that there's levels, and it wasn't necessarily about being the best singer. It was about how well do you express the story that you're trying to tell. So that was a really amazing experience.
The next question that I have is, fast forwarding to now, you've accomplished so much in your career. You've had like amazing success with the singles and with the albums and the collaborations. What have been some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career, and how have you overcome them?
It's a good question. A big challenge for me was, I guess, fighting with my own ego when it came to my idea of who I was and what I was allowed to do. And I put great limitations upon myself because I was fearful that what people might think of me. I was always the guy with the guitar singing these soulful love songs or these deep, well crafted songs with lyrics that, were bordering on moments of poetry. And then when I penned Perfect Strangers with Jonas Blue, I didn't expect to be on the singer on the track. I thought it's just a writing thing, somebody else will sing it. So it was, for me, that was, in a way, it was kind of skin deep, the stuff I wrote. It was like, I'll just have a crack at this and we'll send it, and I won't really think much about it. And then when I was asked to actually feature on the song, it really terrified me because, first of all, what do I do on a dance track? I don't really understand this kind of music. And secondly, there was a part of me that thought that I was too much of an artist to allow myself to do something like that. And obviously, in hindsight, I can look at it and be like, well, it's opened so many doors for me. And I was worried that people would think, oh, JP's sold out, he's doing this commercial music. But actually, I've been around the world with that song and with Jonas, and I've played at many festivals, and you see that it isn't always the deepest poetry that reaches people. Sometimes it's just a simple spoken word, and who am I to first of all put limitations on doors opening and opportunities for me, but also to keep people from hearing my voice on that kind of thing. So that was a real steep learning curve for me, just in terms of feeling comfortable in my own skin doing that kind of thing. And I think the older you get, you learn to not take yourself as seriously, and really music is it's a toy that we all get to play with, and yes, it's therapeutic, and it's a doctor, and it's a counselor, and it's all of these things, but it's okay for it to just be a toy at times and to enjoy that. So that was a challenge. I think a challenge that I still struggle with now, which is more just about, being human, I guess, is finding a balance between my family life and my work life and, my personal life. I've got 3 kids, I've got a wife, and finding that balance, not only between the time that you spend with them, but the amount of time and space that music in the industry, and especially modern day, being an artist, social media, all of this stuff, how to, draw the line when you go home. It's really, really tricky. So that's an ongoing, struggle, how to navigate that.
Mm.
And I think that's something that I'm still trying to figure out. I'm lucky that the people around me are so understanding. But I would say those two for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. If we can go into Perfect Strangers a little bit more, how did that collaboration come together, and how did it shape your trajectory as
Mm.
a solo artist? Because like it did reach all these plateaus, and sort of like, yes, you look back at it and are like, okay, that did very well and I learned a lot from it, but how do you move forward in terms of the choices that you make after that success?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, how it came about was, so. Jonas, his real name is Guy Robin. So Guy had reached out to. He'd had a hit with a cover of Fast Car, Tracy Chapman. So he'd not had as this new project, because he'd been making music for a long time, but as this new project Jonas Blue, he had Fast Car, and then the question was, can he put out one of his own songs and make it work? And he'd had this track, which was the backing track for Perfect Strangers, and he'd sent it out to a bunch of people, and just to Topline, to write, a vocal part or whatever for it. And it just wasn't quite landing where he wanted it. So my A&R guy at Island Records sent it to me and said, listen, they've already got a singer for this track, but they're struggling to nail the melodies and whatever. Would you mind having a look at it? So I thought, I was in the studio one day, and I literally thought I'll spend half a day, just, I'm not going to spend so much time on it because I don't really understand that, but I'll have a go, because at that point I hadn't had any real commercial success. Like, I'd been signed to the record label, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're eating well. So I was like, anything like this, it all helps, publishing, whatever. So I did it, and turns out he loved it, and I thought, okay, that's it, brilliant, hopefully someone will release it and it'll do well. And then the head of Ireland at the minute, Darkest Bees, called me in, and he was talking about, how hard it is to break an artist, and basically the more little fires they have going on with different projects, the easier it is to kind of get them into orbit, I guess. So I thought about it, and also I kind of was like, the worst thing that could happen is the song doesn't do well, and the few fans that I've got kind of lose respect for me, because all of a sudden I've done this completely different sound, and it looks like I'm maybe chasing success. And then the best case scenario would be the song would do great and people would just be happy to hear me on the radio. And it turns out that's what happened. I'm sure there was a few people that had a few raised eyebrows. But there's a lot of people that will say, there's a lot of people that would be happy to see an artist only play to kind of 100 people for the rest of their life and keep it as their little secret. And really, growth doesn't really happen that way. And for me, it was a huge opportunity to grow. So we released it, and obviously it did amazingly well. All of a sudden I was getting played on the radio. I was getting asked to come to different countries to do radio interviews. There was a lot more dance artists reaching out to me to work with them, and that was something that I did put the brakes on a little bit, because I was trying to create an album. I wanted to be an artist. I didn't want to be just a singer that features on dance tracks. It was really important for me to make a record that was about me. However, it did influence my first album a little bit, because when that happened, we didn't really have anything on my album that sounded anywhere close to that world. And the record label were like, how do we bridge the gap? How do we bring these people that have heard your voice for the first time into your project without them just being like, oh, I'm not really into this. And I'd written September Song at that point, and I'd actually given it away. I said, because it didn't really seem right for me. And I don't know whether it was The Voice or Pop Idol or something like that in Australia. There was a connection out there, and they said they wanted the song for the winner of that particular season. Now, after Perfect Strangers, the record label heard this and was like, we need to get it back. That's the song. So we got it back. And, off the back of that, songs like She's on My Mind, September Song, they were the kind of gap bridge between that and my album. So the production of some of the songs on the album changed dramatically at that point. And again, it was tricky for me, because I understood that it was it was a label move, and in hindsight it makes sense. I think when you sign to a major label, you have to understand that there has to be an element of collaboration. And I think a lot of people that go into it, not always, there's certain artists that it just works and they do their thing. For me, there had to be a level of collaboration. And that's really frustrating at times, but I guess it's just understanding the situation that you're in. But there's a few songs like that allow you to do what you want on other songs. And that, it's those songs that tend to do the big numbers. Now, going into after doing those songs, first of all, the expectations of what was a success changed. You know, all of a sudden you might have a song that does 20 million streams and it's seen as not a success.
Mm-hmm.
So that was tricky, you know, because you have songs that things aren't celebrated as easily. Um, and I think that's something that artists need to remind themselves is no matter how big or small the win, you have to celebrate those things. And it isn't always about the songs that do the biggest numbers are the most important. There are other songs that bring people to your music that will come to every single show and will, you know, comment on every post because there's one song that maybe hasn't done hundreds of millions of streams, but it reached them in such a deep place that it will be with them for their life, you know. The other thing, I guess, moving into creating music in the future, the amount of times I went to a session and people just thought that I was Perfect Strangers JP. So all of the sounds that they pulled up which weren't right for my project. So that was difficult to navigate. So it's taken me probably until, you know, this album to get to that place where I'm like, let me get back to my DNA.
Mm.
I think I found myself in a lot of imposter syndrome, definitely finding myself in a world that I thought, well, you guys know better than me about this, so I'll just trust you. And I'll say, I've I've had it in me over the years to be a bit of a people pleaser, and I've kind of been like, well, you know, I'll try and make everybody happy, and actually, it ends up, you know, with me just not really knowing who I am. And I think that was something that happened around the COVID time, and obviously I had that time at home to think about that. And so now, you know, coming out of that and coming into this new space, it's really refreshing, and you know, I'm loving my work. But yeah, that's been a journey, and it was a huge catalyst for learning about myself.
Mm. Where do you think the people pleasing thing came from?
Um, I don't know whether it was. I spent many years trying to get a foot in the door as a professional artist. You know, I I signed when I was 30, so and I've been trying since a teenager. You know, to make music and do all of these things. So I think there was an element of, oh my gosh, I can't believe you believe in me, you know, tell me what to do and I'll do my best, you know. And then there was this other side, which is naturally that healthy side of the artist ego that was like, wait a minute, this doesn't sit right in my spirit. I think maybe it also came from growing up and having a father who was struggling at times. There's this wanting to make sure everyone's all right. There was an element of that, I guess, if we was to go deeper with it. Yeah, and you know, it's something that, you know, I found myself when I was younger in relationships when I first started dating and things like that, and having breakups, and you know, little things like, you know, I might have split up with one person and met somebody else, but I still wanted to make sure that the person that I'd split up with was okay, and it just caused all kinds of problems. And it was like, you need to choose, you know, you
Yeah, been
can't
there.
keep everybody happy. Little things like that in life where you're like, wow, I've been a bit of a chronic people pleaser, you know, at certain times in my life, and it's taken me a long time to kind of go, no, this is where I stand, and my feet are firmly planted, and it doesn't mean that I'm stubborn. There are times when you've just got to stand on that and be like, no, I really believe in this vision and this idea, and I think it's just taken me a while. I think because it took me so long to break into the industry, maybe there was a lack of self-belief that allowed me to have that confidence to say, no, I want to do it this way. And I
Mm.
think now I'm entering that era, you know.
Yeah. It's an exciting time too, right? Because I
Mm.
share that with you in terms of having been an extreme people pleaser. What came with that was a little bit of guilt when you don't do it, and the feeling of, am I being selfish if I'm
Yeah.
kind of not appeasing people?
Mm.
But then at times it's kind of like, well, I do have to think about myself. I do have to think about what I want because people are actually asking me for that. But I'm very excited for you in this turning point because I feel like there's a certain amount of fear to get over in making that decision. This album is said and done. Just a Few Folk is about to come out, now that it's ready to come out, is it pure freedom and elation that you feel, or is it a mixed bag of emotions?
I'd say it's a mixed bag for sure. I think um, the album's been done for a while. There's obviously a couple of new songs that we squeezed in towards the end. So when I first finished the record, I was just so excited to release this music. Now I've had time to sit with it, so it does take the shine off it a little bit just because of the timing. But in terms of sharing something that I feel like I've got my fingerprints all over it, I'm really excited to see. And again, it's the songs that I don't expect to be like huge commercial successes that I'm most excited to see what work it does in the world. Um, but I do feel like it's almost, I feel like the first two albums were me going to university, going to college and learning how to make a record and learning how to kind of be an artist. And now this is almost like my first thing. And even though, it's not an independent release or anything like that, but it feels like I'm setting up the factory now. I'm figuring out how to get the best out of myself. And there's been so much that I've learned in the process of making this record that I feel like, yes, that's the way that I need to do things going forward. So that's amazing. It's like, okay, I've graduated
Mm.
and it's time to share your real work. Not to say anything about the work before, because that early work is so important, because it was a different time in my life, and there's also greatness in navigating things without really knowing where you're going. And sometimes that's more interesting, but I feel like now for me it just feels like I feel quite liberated just to be in this place. And maybe it's that I don't have all of this pressure from having this accidental hit. It's always going to be there when you're working with like big record labels and things like that. But I feel like in terms of my own expectations, and I think the whole idea with this idea of just a few folk, it's like I didn't make this for the masses. I made it to connect with the people who are operating on a similar wavelength, and I do believe that there's going to be at least a few of them in every neighborhood.
Mm.
So hopefully there's a lot of, I mean, this is another thing you were talking about, what are the biggest struggles. The big struggle for me at the minute is being in a world that is so full of amazingly talented people.
Yeah.
Now more than ever, every time you turn on the computer or look at your phone, there's like some amazing singer or amazing musician. It's like, how do I get my little thing out to these people in the world? But then I just have to have the faith that there is something that will connect my music to the right people, and I'm excited to see
Yeah.
who those people are, and how the future opens up for me.
It's amazing. I'm very excited for that too. And if we could kind of like go through some of this catalog of work that you've produced, for the release. Summer of Love started in a hotel room when you were feeling alone.
Mm.
The thing that I was most curious about is the chords. How did those chords find you?
So I've only recently started to really try and understand like theory. It's not really something that I've always just followed my nose, and I've been sort of frustrated with myself for not knowing more. So recently I've been trying to find more, but often I'll sit at the piano and I'll just put my hands on it and I will follow my ears, or I'll follow a melody. So I mean, Summer of Love, it's 4 or 5 chords repeated the whole way through the song. But sometimes it is that simple, and it's something that you loop and it just feels like a place of comfort, or it feels like a place of release, or I don't know. And that was what it was for me. It was like I just wanted to sit in that world. And I do feel like that with the track. It's like whenever I play that, I don't really know what to put on after it, because it's just its own little world. I think I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'd quite like to make a record, a whole album, or at least a project that it's all that kind of world. I just think it'd be
Mm.
a really cool project. And this is it. Like there'll be one song that sometimes it sparks off an idea for a whole project, and I do think that that's something that I'd like to explore in the future. But yeah, I mean, I guess I stumble upon these things, and yeah. And the other thing is, it's funny because I went into the a session the next day with the guys that I wrote the song with, and I felt tired, like my voice was tired. So, but sometimes these things that you might see as negatives, they inform the melodies that I choose. And you know, the vocal, it's 2 octaves, it's soft falsetto, and it's a almost conversational speech level kind of voice. And I would have never wrote those melodies over those chords if I wasn't feeling that in the day. So it's fascinating. I love how it turns out. But in terms of how I chose the chords, you know, I think I've been trying to listen to a little bit. I play with a lot of amazing musicians, you know, people from the church, people from the jazz world, so that my ears are slowly developing through their expertise.
Mm.
And I guess as a curator, I'm learning more little things from them. But I'm really trying to, um, I'm really trying to force myself to understand more about the inner workings of it. I think, especially for any singers that might be listening to this, I think because singing is such an innate thing, we do it naturally, and over time we get better. It doesn't mean that I've not put the hours in or I've not worked on areas that I've had weaknesses, but you know, we don't have to work hard to get good at it. There are some people who naturally they progress and they become great singers. As a result of that, I think there's a lot of singers that struggle to really understand instruments because you have to put the work in, you know. So, and I think that's what it's been with me. You know, I've been able to play the piano, play the guitar enough to kind of write, but now I'm like, no, it's time to put that work in because it really makes a difference. And so that's another thing I'm really excited about because I'm just learning all of these options that I have now. The more I understand it, so that's, you know, I do feel like the next few projects are going to be really interesting. It doesn't mean I'm going to do some avant-garde, 1,000 chords thing, but it's just having different colors and textures and recipes that you can use to create beautiful things.
We fast forward to Diamonds and Gold. This is sort of thematically a love letter to your wife.
Yeah.
What did you want her to feel when she first heard it, and what do you appreciate about her the most?
Um, I guess, you know, I think anybody they want you would want your partner to know how much of a treasure they are to you, and it's not necessarily like always in the grand statements or even though your partner being this, you know, it's the little things within their character that are so big. And I think the whole idea of the song was, you know, I was always a romantic growing up. You know, I thought when I was younger, I wonder what my wife's doing. You know, I wonder what she's doing now. And yeah, and you think that you're going to find them in some far off land, and it turns out like they just show up in your life in some way. And now she's kind of just, we still say, you know, it's crazy that like now we're here and we have these children, and how did that happen? So I think it was just this simple idea of like the greatest riches we have are the people in our lives, and it was a celebration of that. I mean, in terms of her character, you know, people say to me like, when was the first time you saw your wife? And that's different from the first time I met her. The first time I saw my wife was she was at her goddaughter's birthday party. There was some little, and I'd gone along, and we'd been dating for a few months. And watching her and seeing how she was with the children, and I just thought that's the mother of my children right there. And yeah, that was, you know, that was the beautiful moment. And it's funny, you know, people say, oh, when you know, you know. And yeah, it was like all of a sudden it was like, yeah, this is the right person for me. She's an angel. She's amazing.
What was her reaction when she heard the song?
Well, it's funny because I was writing it in one of our bedrooms in the house, so you know, she kind of. It's funny because she'll hear me the way that I tend to write, especially if I'm writing alone, is I will just loop the chords and sing and sing and sing. It's almost like the song slowly all comes at the same time. So I never really record and then write to the recording. I kind of just sit and I go round and round in circles. So it must be really frustrating sometimes because it'd be the same but slightly different melodies over and over and over and over again. So she'd heard it in the next room and she'll sort of say like, that sounds nice. And I can remember bringing her in and just showing her the chorus. And yeah, she really likes it. She was like, I think that's going to be really special. Yeah. But she's used to hearing me singing all the time, you know.
Sad
Yeah.
song doesn't dwell, it reframes heartbreak in a subtle, moving way. Was it important for you to challenge how sadness is usually portrayed in music?
I hadn't really thought about that when I was writing that song. I think it was this. It's kind of the idea that we have these stories about these moments in our past relationships. And sometimes when you get into a new relationship, you talk about your old relationships with your new partner. And it's this idea of taking this sad story and telling your new love about it. It doesn't say that explicitly, because I was actually speaking to my team recently about that song. And, you know, it could be taken in many different ways for many people. It's quite open. And for me, it's this idea of, you know, take this sad song and I hope you kind of go and turn it into your love. So it's not written like that, but that's kind of what I meant with it. And I do think that's it. You know, I've learned it like certain sad moments have become an armor for me. They've become an identity for me. They've become a catalyst for me learning so much about myself. So, you know, there's a very fine line between grief and growth. And so that, and I do feel like that is an ongoing running theme within my music. But yeah, when I was writing that song, I wasn't really thinking about it. It was quite, strangely enough, that was another quite light-hearted session. You know, I didn't really come from a real place of pain or, you know, deep emotion. It was just kind of uncracking the code of what this thing's about. And, you know, is go turn this love into a sad song. I didn't really know what that meant when we first started writing it, and we tried to carve away until it looked familiar. So it'll be interesting to see what people take from that. You know, people come up to me and after shows or in my messages and they tell me how it relates to their life. I'm excited about that.
Me too. Waiting on a Blue Sky feels like one of the emotional pillars of the record. You've mentioned it draws from your childhood in Middleton. What memories came rushing back while writing this?
Well, I mean, I've said this probably many times. Like in Manchester, it rains a lot. I almost need to stop writing songs about the rain because it's too easy. It rains. We get a lot of rain there, so I have a lot of memories about, you know, being stood at the bus stop and it's raining and my socks are wet and I know that I've got to go into whether it's work or school or whatever for the day. And so we spent a lot of time this idea of waiting on a blue sky. I've used it as a metaphor so many times. Maybe I'm getting lazy with it, but it just rings so true for me. You know, this idea of in our own ways, like we're all waiting on a blue sky. You know, we'll all, hopefully, there'll be moments in our life when we get to sit in the sun. And there's going to be moments where it seems like we're sitting in the storm. And I guess it's kind of hoping to be or to have those people around you that do help you sit that storm out and make the best of it. So it's a celebration of that. And I think there's just so many people that will resonate with it. Sonically, you know, for me, that song it became a real, I mean, I've not released like the full track listing of the album yet, or not in order anyway, I don't think. But there's an intro to it, and then that's the first song of the album. I thought sonically it created a world that I wanted people to step into. It's funny, my three albums, the first track's always been quite important to me. The first album, we were raised under grey skies, again, which is quite an emotional, you know, personal lyric. The second album was Holy Water. And for me, after coming out of like the kind of this big pop success, I thought it was quite brave to have like a really live sounding record with a guitar solo in it. And it was, I just wanted to make a statement with that. And I think this record, it was a case of I want people to, as soon as they put this record on, to know that they're stepping into a world with it.
Mm.
And it was really important that I created that kind of palette. So that song informed quite a lot at the beginning of making this record. We had a lot of fun with it.
One of the most interesting things that I've learned from the making of this record is that you made it a point to record to analog tape with
Mm,
the band playing live in one room,
yeah.
essentially picking up the little nuances, the little mistakes. And in today's tech saturated landscape, why was that raw human approach so important to you?
I think it's more important now than ever. With the rise of AI, and I don't really stand on either side of the fence with AI. I'm kind of, it is what it is, and it will. I have fears for other areas, but in the creative world, people want to connect with humans. And I think now, like, if we're going to draw a line in the sand, like, I am all for humanity and for imperfections and for being able to hear somebody's fingers on the fretboard or someone's, the size, the shape of the room, and I know that AI can emulate this, but recently there's a fellow who's a songwriter called Sam Hollander, and he said he did a post on Instagram that said AI can never take a punch. It
Mm,
can't get its heart broken. So how can it write these songs? Of course, we can feed it and get something back. But I do feel like there'll always be people who want to connect with another human and they want to go to their dark places and share their wins with them. And you just can't do that with a machine. So I thought, for this record, that was really important. I do feel like the last couple of albums, production wise, there have been moments where it's been too in the box. It's been too nowadays, everything's too perfect. You can't hear the room.
mm,
You can't imagine sitting in there. And more and more, I'm realizing that the kind of person I am, if I'm in a massive room full of people, I'll quietly fade into the background and I'll watch. But when people come to my shows, I want them to feel like they're in a living room. And I'm trying to figure out how to create live experiences where there isn't this. I don't feel comfortable being the man on the stage. I want to just be somebody who's sharing a moment with a room full of people.
mm,
I don't need to be the one up in lights. It's lovely that people enjoy my music, but when it comes to where I feel as a part of humanity, I really don't care for that.
mm,
And I think that record, I wanted people to feel like they could be in the room with me while they're listening to it, rather than listening to some polished, unattainable thing. And that's something that I'm working on, because our ears have got so used to perfection now that
yeah.
it's hard to push those boundaries. But that was really, really important to me. And also, creating in that situation, I purposefully didn't send the music to the band until a few days before because I wanted room for mistakes to happen. If
Mm.
everything's pre-orchestrated and preordained, then where does God fit within that?
Oh,
Like,
I like
how do
that.
you know that comes in the things that we think we've got figured out, and then we realize that actually that mistake became the best idea on the whole record, and it was
Hmm.
never a mistake. It just
Mm,
didn't come from me.
right.
So I'm excited to leave space for that.
I mean, the technical parts of that makes it more challenging, I guess. You have to get the reels. You have to
Yeah.
find a place that actually can accommodate you in that space. Did that make it harder for you, or
Not for me. I mean,
no?
for Cam Blackwood, the producer, the guy who was kind of overseeing the whole record, he was the one who said, "Well, I know that you get the tape and then you send it to a lab and then they digitize it." So the idea wasn't that we're just going to run it off tape and that's going to be it. It was, when you hear old samples from old
Yeah.
records,
Hmm.
you hear it loads in hip hop music. They have they have just the essence to them. What we were basically trying to do was create our own samples. So there's a thing that a lot of writers and people use called Splice, which is a sound bank of millions and millions of players, and producers will upload sounds to that. So you can go on there, you can find whatever drum kits, whatever guitar parts. It was really important for me that we didn't use anything from there. And I'm not against it. I think it's an amazing tool for, if I had that when I was first starting out, when I was mainly just singing, it would have been incredible. It's an amazing thing. But for this record, one of the things that I enjoy the most is creating sounds. You know, for years before anybody knew who I was in rehearsal rooms with my friends, messing around with guitar amps and pedals and just making noise. And that for me is part of the joy. You know, I don't only want to make, you know, the house, I want to be involved in what the bricks are made out of. And that's what I was lucky enough to be able to do on this record. And I would like to think that this is an album that people will sample in the future and make new songs out of. And going forward, that's what excites me.
Beautiful. JP, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story, the transparency, the wisdom, the knowledge. We are at the last question of the main section of the interview. And then from here, we just move to a quick rapid fire round. The last question of this main section is, for aspiring songwriter artists who look up to you, what advice would you give them?
Now more than ever, I would advise to delve into your unique gifts, because anything that somebody else can do will be turned into AI. You know, if you're new, you have something the world has never seen. Even if you feel like you're nothing special, you are made one of one, and your outlook on this world, the sound that comes out of your voice, that you're one of one. And I think really, really digging into that and exploring that fearlessly and relentlessly is gonna pay dividends in the future. I think how unique you are, even if it's not, you don't need to be completely, you know, redefining the wheel, but just figuring out those little things that are yours and nobody else's. My advice would be to honor that as best you can.
That's going to go a long way for a lot of people. And thank you so much. We're here with JP Cooper, and this is Off the Topline, brought to you by Mixmaster. JP, I'm going to play you 3 beats. You're going to choose one. Once you choose, you've got 3 minutes to create a top line however you want. Melodies, mumbling, freestyling, hooks, anything goes. Afterward, we'll have a little talk and we'll break down what just happened. Okay, so here's beat number 1, and just let me know when you want to go to the next beat.
Okay. All right, cool. Number 2, yeah, let's give it a go. So you want me to just jam something over it? Sitting and writing for love letters I didn't say. Sitting and writing these love letters. I couldn't have said it better. Mama, she said that love gon' get ya. Do it the moment I met ya. Sitting here writing these love letters, I couldn't have said it better. Mama, she said that love gon' get ya. Do it the moment I met ya. Sitting here writing these letters.
Is it possible to navigate us through what exactly was going on in the creative moment as it was happening?
So in this instance, because there was such a strong melodic line with the ba 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 da, often I find that it's good to not fight that, you know. If it's on the guitar or if it's on the piano or whatever, sometimes it's good to pick up on parts of that and then deviate from time to time rather than having too many counter melodies going on and things. So I guess very, very, very early stages, I mean, I'm a big editor, so I'll start with really broad strokes and I might just capture something that the words will fit the cadence of that. So ba-da-da-da, ba-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-da-da. So I'm literally just, what's this feeling making me think? And the music, it spoke to me in a kind of way that was like, it was something that's trying to give you advice. It was comforting, but there was some sort of advice in there. There was certainly a romance to it in that kind of lo-fi sort of a way. So the first words that came out was, couldn't have said it better. I didn't really know what that meant, but it sounds like something that, okay, well, someone said something to you. What is it? Couldn't have said what better? And so then with the nostalgia, it's like, Mama told me that love's gonna get you. I knew it the moment I met you. And now I'm sitting here writing love letters to you, you know? So that's like a really broad stroke that I would definitely explore more. But the idea of it is kind of like, okay, well, almost love is this thing that a lot of people run from, especially when you're young. You either run to it or you run away from it, but often it's going to happen whether you want it to or not, and whether it's something that is going to feel good because you get to enjoy that, or whether it's something that you can never have. So that as a concept, it's like, okay, cool, there's a concept. And I think one of the hardest things in writing is often just finding a concept, because coming up with melodies and piecing words together is okay, but if you have a kind of anchor in a concept, then you can really dig into that. So I'll tend to write multiple verses and multiple choruses and maybe even touch on two different concepts just to see what works, especially if it's a piece of music that I'm really excited about.
Like, I'm just trying to like understand that from, I guess, even more of a scientific point of view. Like how does like whatever that melody was doing, the drums, just the sonics of the track, birth those concepts so instinctually. Do you ever think about that?
With that, it was literally, what's the cadence of that? Ba da 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 da, and then couldn't have said it better. I don't know where that came from, but it's almost like a little breadcrumb, you know, a trail of breadcrumbs. You just pick up the next one, and okay, where am I? And sometimes, you know, things come out that are good, and sometimes you get to the end of it, and you're like, you know, turn up again tomorrow, follow another trail of breadcrumbs, and hope that you end up, you know, somewhere exciting. So it's funny, you know, actually, I've got to say, you know, when that happens and it's like, oh my gosh, people are going to be watching this, I get nervous because I'm like, oh, I need to deliver something. And even sometimes now, even as an established artist who's been doing this for a while, whenever you work with new people, especially if it's people that you respect, you want to bring your A game, but you can't always turn up with your A game with this, because so much of it is, it's just catching ideas. And I guess the A game comes in the edit, and that's why I'm a quiet. You know, there's certain people that I work with or certain rooms that I've been in, and there might be one person who just instantly start singing, and it's amazing. And I'm kind of like, I shrink into the background because I'm much quieter, kind of let me quietly just mumble a few things, and then okay, cool, and then we'll edit and it. It's so interesting how people have different ways of doing things. But yeah, I think, you know, the psychology of it for me is the deeper understanding of how much more can I bring out of this one little line, and how far can I push myself to get to that point where I'm satisfied with it. And my dopamine is satisfied by it. You know, I think a lot of the time we're just chasing that, what makes me feel good. But the main thing is just starting with something. I mean, it's a few lines, they're not amazing, but it's like a crack of light in a doorway, you know. Let me just pull a little more.
Now that we have this seed of an idea, in the world of JP Cooper, what would need to happen to get it over the finish line and out to your listeners to enjoy? Like, what would be the typical steps that would happen after you start?
So usually I'd do my best to kind of say, do you know what, to give it what it's worth. It's always worth at least finishing like a verse and a chorus, you know. If it's just a little idea and it can go around and round and round, you know. If you get to the verse and the chorus and you're like, actually, this is really good, then push on, finish the whole song. But I think what I would probably do at this point, I would probably play around the progression a little bit more, and I would improvise a little bit more to see if there's places where I can take it vocally, where it's sitting in a place that feels like, okay, I'm really letting loose now. But then when it comes to the words, I would probably, this is almost like a really simple, I would look at sort of the rhyme schemes, look at some of the imagery, go a little bit deeper with these kind of lessons that somebody's told you. Maybe I'd go deeper into this idea that, like, you know, love's gonna get you, like it's this thing that you can't run from, and that maybe paint it like a villain, maybe paint it like something that is, you know, the opposite of what people might call love. That's when you start getting into these interesting things, like, okay, well, I like to think of opposites. I like to think of them in, you know, in there's night, day, dark and light, and all of those kind of things. But I often think about what are the opposites, and how do I play with those, and how do I put an interesting spin on it. And maybe you know, the idea of the love letters could be interesting. You know, it could be laid out in that sort of way. Maybe a verse would start with almost as if you're addressing somebody, like you're writing to somebody, where are you? Then I'd try and dive deeper and more into the idea of like this whole thing of show, don't tell, you know. So the idea of letting people into the, where are you? Where were you at that time? What were the smells and sights and sounds and all of those feelings? I'd try and squeeze them into it. So that's why I really take my time. If I think something's worth it, like I'll go home and I'll sit with all those things and I'll get into that. But sometimes something's really simple and it just works, you know. And sometimes the sound of certain words, they come out of your throat better than others just because of the shape of it. And, you know, depending on where the pitch is, you know, there's certain things that, you know, certain sounds, vowels might be harsher than others might be sweeter. So I think, you know, that's sometimes, you know, the words might be trumped by the way that it sounds. You might say, well, actually on the paper, that reads great, but it doesn't sing so well. So there's a whole process of it. But for me, it's all about the spark, and then digging into that as much as possible, and turning that into its own little world and its own little universe, and what are the characters and what were they wearing and what kind of attitude did they have, and then it's you know, getting more involved. So what are my options really? And I think, you know, when you're thinking about the rhymes and the way you want to play with the words, and you just end up with a page full of ideas that are in front of you. So then I might sit back at the piano. Sometimes I get when I'm in my own little studio, I have a whiteboard, like a big whiteboard, and I'll just write a bunch of words on there that I like the sound of, that work within that world. And so I'll play and I'll be improvising, but I'll be looking at them as well. And all of a sudden they start to come together. I don't tend to do that when I'm working with other people, but that's more like when I get into the edit a bit more at home. That's what I like to do. But some people, I'm not really a freestyler. You know, there's some people who can just, it just comes, and I wish I could do that. You know, whenever I'm in the room with someone like that, I'm like, wow. And every now and again, I might have a day where the words just stack up. But a lot of the time, it's just kind of getting into the nitty gritty and seeking until you're satisfied.
Do you often pull from other art references, like movies, books you've read, other songs, as sort of like ways to compare?
Not so much to compare, but definitely to, like, they're amazing for coming up with concepts. And you know, often, so before this album, I knew that it was like, okay, I've got to write a bunch of time that I'm going to be writing. And before I got into that, I just looked for concepts. So there were certain things that I wanted to write about, and I might have a line or two, or even just a word. Because then when I'd sit down, I'd be like, okay, we're writing now. I'd know what I was aiming for. So whether that was reading a book and there was a line in the book, or there was something that somebody said to somebody in the book, or if I was watching a movie and something jumped out at me, I would sketch that down and I would explore that a little bit more. I know people who always have like movies on in the background when they're in the studio, but they turn the volume down, so it's just kind of there. I don't do that. I should. I don't have a TV or whatever in here. I don't know. I could have set it up on another computer, but yeah, that's kind of cool, because there'll be colours and visuals and just things that people are wearing and things that you see. You know, often people will just look around the room and they might see something, or be something that's written on the side of a book. So it's cool to kind of surround yourself with those things. I feel like nowadays, especially since like with social media, and a lot of people are sharing the same kind of stuff, you know, so there's this like big curation of everybody's being influenced by the same thing. So I have often thought about, maybe I should like go to galleries more, or go to things that like aren't just out there, you know, they're brand new. So that's something that I definitely should do. In the minute, it's like, you know, time with the kids and getting them to school and all this kind of stuff. But I think, you know, taking yourself almost like on creative dates to kind of just go and see something and be there on your own, but purposefully, for the purpose of seeking inspiration, whether that's for concepts for songs, or whether it's for colours of records, you know, sleeves, or just the vibe of how you want this to look. I think, you know, taking as much of that in.
Well, JP, man, I had a blast just talking to you and vibing out. But yeah, we're at our last question, final question of what's next for JP Cooper? Anything you want to promote to the Sonic.ly community?
Yeah, so I guess the main thing is my album, my third studio album, Just a Few Folk, is out on the 13th of February. So that's the big one. You know, this year, hopefully I'll be releasing a lot more music. Even outside of that, you know, I'm definitely hoping to get involved in a few other things. There's a couple of projects that may come of a surprise that are kind of really in their early stages that I kind of dreamed up at the end of last year. So I'm doing a bit of experimenting this year outside of promoting this record. But yeah, that's the main sort of concrete thing. 13th of February, Just a Few Folk. Can't wait to share it with you guys.